I'm a 25-year-old female getting married to my fiance who is 27 years old next year. My best friend A, 25-year-old female, is maid of honor. And my friend B, 24-year-old female, is a bridesmaid along with my sister and fiance's sister. I had a private wedding dress try-on at a really lovely store close to where I live. My mother, sister, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, maid of honor, and bridesmaid were present for this try-on, as I was allowed 6 guests and wanted them all to be involved. I have dreamed of trying on wedding dresses for a long time and wanted a nice moment with the people closest to me. Instead, I was left feeling quite humiliated, embarrassed, and upset after the appointment. I did end up choosing and buying a dress. Both my maid of honor, A, and bridesmaid B, spent the entirety of the appointment where I tried on different dresses and showed everyone to ask for opinions and feedback, whispering to each other, laughing, and offering no feedback or even a positive compliment on any single wedding dress I tried on. Even when I found the dress of my dreams, that everyone ended up loving too. My mom cried, they didn't say a single thing, even when I asked if they liked the dress. They couldn't even pay me a compliment, and the dresses were nice, nothing outlandish or alternative, very normal, nice wedding dresses. The only time my maid of honor spoke was to exclaim that she heavily disliked the dress I was wearing as it was off the shoulder, a style she hates. That was it. I was quite embarrassed that my 2 closest friends were so negative the whole night in front of my family. I felt heavily embarrassed and just really upset. My sister and sister-in-law mentioned their behavior, and my sister-in-law messaged my fiancé to tell him how sad she felt for me to have such negative friends, which prompted him to ask me what happened, as I had just brushed it off and didn't want to make a big deal of it. However, after speaking to him, he was quite upset on my behalf and said that if I felt comfortable, I should bring it up and ask them why they behaved that way. I did, very politely, ask them why neither of them paid me a compliment on any wedding dress I tried on, or just gave me feedback, which wasn't received well at all. They didn't think they had done anything wrong and had behaved perfectly fine the whole night, going as far as to say they quite enjoyed themselves. Am I the jerk for still being upset about this and calling them out on it? To add, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone that took the time to comment and offer perspective. I very much understand that this may seem quite trivial, and since it's a wedding thing, no one really cares as much about this as me and my fiancé. Got the spelling right, haha. For some additional information, this situation was really just the breaking point for me. I was told after the fact as well that my bridesmaid was also picking dresses for herself the entire time and was rude to my mother-in-law. And for everyone speculating, asking, no, this is not the first time that they behaved like this. This was honestly very tame compared to some of the nonsense I have had to deal with from both of them. They can be very nasty and negative people and have both been mean to me before to the point of making me cry, go low contact for a while, and again, I didn't message them and call them out on any of this until I was approached by everyone at the appointment about it afterwards, as it was noticed by everyone. And no, I didn't make them come to this appointment. They all asked to be there, so I booked a private appointment to accommodate the number of guests I had. I will be very much taking some time to think about these 2 friendships. And thank you again to everyone who commented. I never call out bad behavior or speak up about how I feel with friends, as I often tell myself I'm being overdramatic/stupid, and I understand if you think I'm still being that way here. Thanks everyone. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. Both my maid of honor, A, and bridesmaid B, spent the entirety of the appointment whispering to each other, laughing and offering no feedback or even a positive compliment to any single wedding dress I tried on. Why are you even friends with these mean-spirited people, let alone giving them important roles in your special day? Your sister and sister-in-law were concerned as well. They didn't think they had done anything wrong and had behaved perfectly fine the whole night. I'd ditch them both and ask your sister-in-law and sister people who actually like you and want you to be happy. Comment 2, and this is how you trim your guest list and save yourself some money. Weddings are expensive. Why do you want people that aren't supportive to be there, partying on your dime? You say even your mother noticed their behavior and asked why you are even friends with them. So it's not just you. Not the idiot. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support and advice. So after the whole dress try-on fiasco, things have only gotten more complicated. 2 weeks ago, I decided to have a heart-to-heart with A and B. I invited them over for coffee, hoping to clear the air and maybe understand why they acted the way they did. I thought maybe there was something going on in their lives that I didn't know about. But when they arrived, it was like walking on eggshells. They were defensive from the get-go, and it felt like they were just waiting for me to bring up the dress appointment. I started by telling them how I felt during the try-on, how their behavior had hurt me, and how I just wanted to understand what was going on. A immediately rolled her eyes and said, "Are we really doing this again?" B just sat there, arms crossed, looking annoyed. I tried to stay calm and asked them if there was something I had done to upset them. I finally spoke up and said, "You always make everything about you. It's exhausting." That hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know they felt that way. I asked for examples, trying to understand their perspective. B chimed in, saying that I always expect them to drop everything for me and that I never consider their feelings. I was shocked. I had no idea they felt this way. I apologized if I had ever made them feel that way, but I also pointed out that they had never communicated this to me before. A just shrugged and said, "Well, now you know." The conversation didn't go anywhere productive. They left, and I felt even worse than before. I talked to my fiancé about it, and he was furious. He said that true friends wouldn't treat me this way and that I deserve better. He suggested that maybe it was time to reconsider having them in the wedding party. I was torn. These were my closest friends, but their behavior was making me miserable. A few days later, my sister-in-law called me. She had heard about the coffee meeting from my fiancé and wanted to check in. She told me that she had noticed A and B's behavior for a while now, and that she had always felt they were a bit toxic. She shared a story about how at a family gathering a few months ago, A had made a snide comment about my weight. I had been oblivious to it at the time, but looking back, I realized there had been other moments like that. I decided to take a step back from A and B. I didn't officially kick them out of the wedding party, but I stopped reaching out to them. I focused on the other aspects of wedding planning and spent more time with my sister and sister-in-law. It was a relief not to have that negativity around me. Then last week, something unexpected happened. I received a message from an old friend, C, who I hadn't spoken to in years. She had heard about the wedding and wanted to reconnect. We met up for lunch, and it was like no time had passed. She was genuinely excited for me and offered to help with anything I needed. It was such a stark contrast to how A and B had been acting. C and I started hanging out more, and she even helped me with some wedding DIY projects. It felt good to have someone who was supportive and positive. My fiancé noticed the change in my mood and encouraged me to consider asking C to be a bridesmaid. I was hesitant at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I finally made the decision to ask C to be a bridesmaid. She was thrilled and accepted immediately. I knew this meant I had to officially address the situation with A and B. I couldn't avoid it any longer. I called them both and asked if we could meet up. They agreed, albeit reluctantly. When we met, I told them about my decision. I explained that I needed to surround myself with people who were supportive and positive, especially during such an important time in my life. A was furious. She accused me of being selfish and said that I was throwing away years of friendship. B just shook her head and said, "I knew this was coming. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I knew it was the right decision. I couldn't keep people in my life who made me feel bad about myself." After they left, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I had lost 2 friends, but I had also gained a new one in C. In the days that followed, I reflected on my friendships with A and B. I realized that there had been red flags all along, but I had ignored them because I didn't want to lose my friends. I remembered a time in college when A had made a big deal about me not attending her birthday party because I had a family emergency. She had guilt-tripped me for weeks, and I had apologized profusely, even though I had done nothing wrong. B had always been more subtle, but she had a way of making me feel small with her backhanded compliments. Looking back, I saw a pattern of behavior that I had overlooked. They had always made me feel like I was the problem, but in reality, they were the ones who were toxic. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was also liberating. I felt like I could finally breathe. As I move forward with my wedding planning, I feel more at peace. I have a supportive fiance, a wonderful family, and a new friend who genuinely cares about me. It's not the fairy tale I had imagined, but it's real and it's mine. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to walk my dad's possessive fiancée down the aisle after she tried to replace our mom? My dad is getting married in September, and a few months ago, his fiancée asked me if I would walk her down the aisle. She's not close to her own family, and she has no kids of her own. Dad has me, 17-year-old male, and my two sisters, 20-year-old female and 15-year-old female. Our mom died 8 years ago, so it was just us and Dad before his fiancée came into his life, and then ours. I don't really like his fiancée. I accept that my dad does, but she comes across as kind of pushy to me and a little too possessive. She had a moment when my older sister moved all her stuff out of our house a few months ago so she could take it to her own place. The moment was over when my sister asked Dad for photos of his and Mom's wedding, if he had any spares, and she was upset that they were still in the house, and the fact that my sister wanted to take some. My younger sister and I got upset when all photos of our mom were taken down in the living room and dining room. Dad's fiancée was upset about our reaction and said we should want this to be comfortable for her. She doesn't like us calling her by her first name and tried to influence us to call her Mommy. We both knew that was another word for Mom and said no. She said it's not Mom though and could be special for us to call her that. My older sister had a small surgery and she asked Dad if he would be able to come and stay with her and drive her back to her place. Dad said he could try, and he said to let her know if he couldn't. His fiancée told him she'd do it if he couldn't, and my younger sister heard them talk about it, so she warned my older sister. So my older sister called back and said that if he couldn't, she'd ask our grandma. Grandma ended up going with her, and Dad's fiancée got upset that she didn't want her there. Mother's Day was also awkward last year because she expected us to celebrate her. This year was doubly so because the expectation was still there. I have talked to my dad about it, and I have told her as well, but nothing really changed, and she got upset. Again, so I said no to walking her down the aisle, and I have continued saying no, and she continues asking. It's sort of the final few months, and she told me how much she wants me to do it because it shows me embracing her into the family and makes her feel supported by not just Dad, but the other male in the family. I told her I didn't want to do it. It's become a source of tension. My sisters are on my side, and Dad has tried to compromise with her by them walking together, but it hasn't changed things. Am I the jerk? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. This woman is trying so desperately to force a connection and needs time to develop. She has set herself back years by her aggressive approach, the exact opposite of her intentions. You don't need to walk her down the aisle, and you don't have to feel bad about not doing it. Honestly, the way she acts towards you and your siblings, she's lucky you're even attending this wedding at all. Comment 2, not the idiot. Have a long talk with your dad. Tell him you're happy that he found someone, but she will never replace your mom. Tell him that her persistence has made you and the rest of his kids not like her. Ask him to handle her expectations because it can only get worse if he doesn't. Tell him not to allow her to have or get rid of any of your mom's keepsakes. Ask him to divide them among you now. Now for the update, thanks for reading my last post. So a lot has happened in the past week, and it's been pretty intense. My dad's fiancée, let's call her S, has been pushing even harder for me to walk her down the aisle. She cornered me in the kitchen one morning and practically begged me, saying it would mean the world to her. I stood my ground and told her no, again. She got teary-eyed and stormed off, which made things super awkward at breakfast. Later that day, my dad pulled me aside. He looked really stressed and said that S had been crying all morning. He asked me to reconsider, but I told him I just couldn't do it. He sighed and said he understood, but that it was making things really hard for him. I felt bad, but I also felt like I had to stick to my decision. Then something unexpected happened. My younger sister found a letter in S's purse while looking for some gum. She showed it to me, and it was from S's ex-husband. The letter was pretty intense, talking about how he missed her and wanted to get back together. It also mentioned that they had a child together, which was a huge shock because S had always said she didn't have any kids. My sister and I were stunned. We didn't know what to do with this information. We decided to tell our older sister about the letter. She was just as shocked as we were and said we needed to tell Dad. But before we could do that, S found out we had the letter. She confronted us, furious and panicked. She begged us not to tell Dad, saying it would ruin everything. She admitted she had a child, but said she had to give him up for adoption when she was young and that it was too painful to talk about. She said she didn't want Dad to know because she was afraid he wouldn't understand. This put me in a really tough spot. I didn't know if I should tell Dad or keep S's secret. My sisters were divided on what to do. My older sister thought we should tell Dad, but my younger sister thought we should keep quiet for now. I felt torn and didn't know what the right thing to do was. Meanwhile, the tension in the house was getting worse. S was acting super nice to us, almost like she was trying to win us over. It felt fake and made me even more uncomfortable. My dad seemed oblivious to all the drama, which made me feel even more isolated. One night I overheard S talking to someone on the phone. She was crying and saying she didn't know how much longer she could keep up the act. She mentioned something about needing to tell Dad the truth, but being too scared. This made me even more suspicious of her motives. The next day, my dad asked me to go for a walk with him. He said he noticed I seemed stressed and wanted to know what was going on. I felt like this was my chance to tell him about the letter, but I hesitated. I didn't want to hurt him or make things worse, so I just told him I was feeling overwhelmed with everything going on and that I needed some space. He seemed to understand and said he was there for me if I needed to talk. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the letter and what I should do. I decided to talk to my older sister again. She said she still thought we should tell Dad, but that it was ultimately my decision. She said she would support me no matter what I chose. The next morning, I woke up to find S and my dad having a heated argument. I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but it was clear that something big was going on. My dad looked really upset, and S was crying. I felt a knot in my stomach, wondering if they were arguing about the letter. After the argument, my dad came to my room. He looked exhausted and said he needed to talk to me. He said S had told him about her child and that she had been keeping it a secret because she was afraid of how he would react. He said he was hurt that she hadn't told him sooner, but that he understood why she was scared. He asked me if I knew about it, and I admitted that I did. He looked disappointed, but said he appreciated my honesty. This whole situation has been really hard on all of us. My dad and S are trying to work through their issues, but things are still tense. My sisters and I are trying to support Dad, but it's been tough. I still don't feel comfortable walking S down the aisle, and now I feel even more conflicted about everything. I guess we'll see what happens next. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for getting a teacher fired because she ignored my son's speech impediment? I have a son who I will call Jack, 12-year-old male, with my husband, 42-year-old male. Jack has a speech impediment that causes him to stutter. It's not too bad at home, but he really struggles to speak in front of other people due to some past bullying. He's okay when it's just his friends, but if he has to speak in front of the whole class, he can take several minutes to finish a sentence, which he finds very upsetting. My husband and I have spoken to the school and have arranged accommodations for Jack. All of his teachers know not to call on him for reading or to answer questions, and he is allowed to raise his hand or have a friend respond for him when the teacher is taking the register. He has a note from school which he can show his teachers if they question why he is not able to speak aloud. Recently, my son has moved up to a higher level English class where he has a new teacher who I will call Mrs. A. Last week, she tried to get my son to read aloud. He showed her the note and she didn't make him. However, she emailed me saying that she didn't think my son needed the note. I explained he did and told her the school had evidence from his speech therapist, thinking that was it. That was until Monday when I had to come pick Jack up from school. The nurse said he felt sick, but when he got into the car, he confessed that was not really the case. Basically, Mrs. A had asked him to read, and he then showed her the note again. But she said that she had seen him talking to his friends and knew he could speak fine when he wanted to, and telling him not to be so shy. When my son refused, she promised to let the whole class out early if he read. Again, he shook his head. Some of his classmates were understanding, but as it's a new class, some of them don't know him as well and were upset at him for the fact they didn't get an early break, causing them to be rude to him. My husband and I were obviously very upset and sent an email to the school to report her, but I also made a post on the school's parent WhatsApp group calling her a cruel, power-tripping bully and explaining what happened. From what I can gather, a screenshot of my message got shared around with many other parents siding with me. However, I received a message today from the school warning me not to use abusive language to describe teachers and telling me to please speak to the school directly instead of complaining online, as it could compromise teacher safety. Part of me feels justified in sharing, but I don't know if I went too far in calling her that and then sharing it to a group chat with basically all the year's parents, especially if it could really put her in danger. Am I the jerk? To add, my son does have speech therapy and has improved over time. The accommodations aren't designed to be there his whole life, and we are working on speaking in front of a group. Hopefully, he will feel confident enough after the summer holiday. But experiences like this, where he feels forced to speak, do set him back and make it harder. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. Also, absolutely not the school shot back. I would screenshot that and go straight to the head of the school district with that nonsense. Hurtful language? What was the teacher doing when she was trying to bully your son into doing something he wasn't comfortable with? If possible, get the law involved. I would raise concerns and hold the entire school accountable for this unacceptable behavior. How dare they? This is clearly an attempt to pressure you into giving in. Don't tolerate it. Recruit other parents to help. I have no patience for school districts harassing their power like this. Comment 2, not the idiot. You made it clear that the accommodations were necessary, and instead of respecting that, she made it worse by involving his peers. Now it's not just the teacher bullying him, she set him up to be bullied by others. I probably would have gone to the administration before discussing it in a parent group, but I know from experience that sometimes the only way to get the school to address issues is to make them public. Otherwise, they hide it and the child continues to suffer. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After the incident with Mrs. A, things escalated pretty quickly. On Tuesday, I received a call from the school principal asking for a meeting with both my husband and me. We went in that afternoon, and the principal explained that Mrs. A had been put on temporary leave while they investigated the situation. They assured us that Jack wouldn't have to deal with her for the time being, which was a relief. However, they also mentioned that my post in the parent WhatsApp group had caused quite a stir, and they were concerned about the potential backlash against Mrs. A. That same evening, I got a message from another parent who I'll call Sarah. She told me that her daughter had also had issues with Mrs. A, though not related to speech. Apparently, Mrs. A had a history of being overly strict and dismissive of students' needs. Sarah suggested that we gather more parents who had similar experiences and present a united front to the school. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed to meet with her and a few other parents the next day. On Wednesday, we met at a local coffee shop. There were about 6 of us, and each parent shared their story. It became clear that Mrs. A had a pattern of behavior that was problematic. One parent mentioned that her son, who has ADHD, was often singled out and made to feel like he was just being lazy. Another parent said that her daughter, who has anxiety, was frequently told to just get over it. We decided to draft a formal letter to the school, detailing our concerns and requesting that Mrs. A undergo additional training or be reassigned. While all this was happening, Jack was having a tough time. He was anxious about going to school and worried about what his classmates thought of him. On Thursday morning, he had a bit of a meltdown, saying he didn't want to go to school anymore. My husband and I had a long talk with him, reassuring him that we were doing everything we could to make things better. We also decided to reach out to a speech therapist for additional support. That afternoon, I received an email from the school stating that they had received our letter and were taking our concerns seriously. They mentioned that they would be conducting a thorough review of Mrs. A's teaching methods and her interactions with students. They also said they would be implementing additional training for all teachers on how to handle students with special needs. However, the situation took an unexpected turn on Friday. I got a call from the principal who informed me that Mrs. A had decided to resign. She felt that the accusations against her were damaging her reputation and that it would be best for her to leave. While part of me felt relieved that Jack wouldn't have to deal with her anymore, another part of me felt guilty. Had we gone too far? Was there a way to resolve this without someone losing their job? Later that day, I received another message from Sarah. She told me that some parents were upset about Mrs. A's resignation, feeling that we had unfairly targeted her. They believed that she was a good teacher who was just misunderstood. This made me question whether we had handled the situation correctly. I didn't want to be responsible for someone losing their livelihood, but I also needed to protect my son. As the weekend approached, I found myself reflecting on the whole ordeal. I remembered a time when I was in school and had a teacher who didn't understand my struggles with math. I was often made to feel stupid and inadequate, which affected my confidence for years. I didn't want Jack to go through the same thing, but I also didn't want to become the kind of person who ruined someone else's career. My husband and I had a long talk that evening. He reminded me that our primary responsibility was to Jack and his well-being. We agreed that while the situation was unfortunate, it was necessary to take a stand for our son and other students who might be suffering in silence. We also decided to reach out to the school to see if there was any way we could help Mrs. A transition to a new role or find another job. Over the weekend, we spent a lot of time with Jack, trying to boost his confidence and reassure him that things would get better. We also made plans to meet with his speech therapist more frequently to help him build his speaking skills. We wanted to make sure that he felt supported and understood, both at home and at school. In the end, this whole experience has been a learning process for all of us. It's made me realize how important it is to advocate for my child, but also to consider the broader implications of my actions. I hope that moving forward, we can find a balance between standing up for what's right and being compassionate towards others. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.